So today's theory is a bit of a fun one. This is a collection of loose connections that I have pulled together to create what I think is a very interesting narrative. One possible way of explaining the story of several of the characters in Playtime Co. In today's theory, I'm going to be looking at the possibility of who exactly is 1006, but in coming up with this theory, I think I might have also figured out exactly who Huggy Wuggy and Kissy Missy are as well. Now, I do want to point out that today's theory stands in contrast with some other creators, and I want to make this very clear that I'm not saying that their theories are wrong, and I'm not saying that my theory is correct. This is just another possibility, but one that I think is an incredibly interesting one. So I don't want anybody to think that this is a shot at any of the creators or that this is saying that their theories are wrong, because honestly, anybody's theory could be correct at this moment in time. So I am of course talking about who exactly is Experiment 1006. So this theory began when I watched Super Horror Bro's video. In his theory, he talked about the possibility that 1006 is Elliot Ludwig. Now, the main backbone of this theory is the fact that Elliot Ludwig was a genius. He was, after all, the creator and founder of Playtime Co. And 1006 is also similarly very intelligent, being able to create a laser out of a clock, for an example. Now again, this is potentially true. This is a very good theory and I like it a lot. However, I think there is a very different possibility, one that just goes a little bit more deeply than that one. So possibly a good place to start is why I don't think that 1006 is Elliot Ludwig. Now, if we look at Elliot Ludwig's character, we don't have a lot of information, but there are a few key details, and one of those details I think actually provides evidence against the idea that Elliot is 1006. If you look at Elliot's biography, we can see that he founded Playtime Co. in 1930. This, however, put massive personal strain on Elliot. His dedication and work ethic caused a massive strain on his family, leading to his divorce with his wife Molly in the same year. We can also see that he was described as being incredibly caring, and I quote, "He devoted every waking second of his life to bring joy to children." So it seems like Elliot's aim in creating Playtime Co. was very honourable. Yes, he probably wanted to make a lot of money, I'm sure that he did, but he also wanted to bring joy to children. The company was built on the foundation of bringing happiness to children. But doesn't that seem a little bit odd? Experiment 1006 is described as being incredibly violent, more so than any other experiment.
The prototype seems to possess an unprecedented level of intelligence, beyond that of all other test subjects, as well as an alarming willingness to commit violence.
We can see that 1006 is incredibly aggressive and actively sets a trap to lure in scientists to his room before attacking them. We also have a lot of evidence that 1006 was the one that killed all of the staff members that were on board at the time of his escape. So why would this very good man who had very good intentions end up being the most evil character in this series? Either we're missing some very key details in the middle somewhere, or, as I've said, Elliot Ludwig is not 1006. So if Elliot Ludwig isn't 1006, well, then who is? Let's look at the key piece of information that Super Horror Bro very rightly brought up once again. 1006 is a genius. He is very innovative. Who else do we know in Playtime Co. that is very innovative? Well, perhaps the head of innovation, Laith Pierre. As head of the innovation department, we can safely assume that Laith Pierre is very innovative. And if you look at Experiment 1006's mentality, I would say more innovative than visionary, as Elliot Ludwig is described as being. It seems like 1006 is very good at cobbling things together, creating new technology. Again, seems like something the head of innovation would be very good at. But this isn't just the only connection that I have between Laith Pierre and 1006. In fact, I think personality-wise, Laith Pierre is a much better fit than Elliot. Let's look at what we know from Laith Pierre. We can safely assume that Laith Pierre is very paranoid. We know this from the fact that he is the one that talks about the security systems at the beginning of the game, in the very first tape. These security systems, which seem like a lie. He talks about these tripwires automatically communicating with the police, which seems like a lie, so we can add lying to his list of character traits. But his paranoia goes further than that. If we look at Kissy Missy's poster, there is a whole rule dedicated to not scaring Laith Pierre. Now, why would that be there? I've talked in previous theories about the possibility that this is a tongue-in-cheek reference. This is essentially the other staff members making fun of Laith Pierre. Knowing that he's very paranoid, by adding this rule, it's a direct dig, a jab It's essentially the other staff members making fun of him. We also hear how Pierre talks to other staff members in this factory, and let's just be honest, he doesn't exactly seem like a good guy. He seems like a bit of a jerk if you ask me.
Now come on, get out of my sight. Actually, grab me a coffee, will you? Actually, never mind, get out of my sight.
In my opinion, this actually sets up a villain arc very, very nicely. Pierre was incredibly paranoid, and all the other staff members pick on him because of it. He is essentially the outcast, he's the joke. He is the Max from Spider-Man. He is, like so many modern villains, he was the downtrodden. Now, in my opinion, this could absolutely lead to resentment from Pierre to the other staff members. So when whatever happened that caused Pierre to be transferred into 1006, he's the one most likely to not really care about the other staff members at all. After all, there is a possibility that this transfer process changes people's psychology for the worse, and his psychology already started off in a fairly dark place. He had a lot of resentment, a lot of bitterness towards these people. So once he was transferred into 1006, that bitterness and resentment turned towards hate. That hatred caused him to kill them all. Again, Elliot Ludwig, being an incredibly good person who cared about children, doesn't seem like the murderous rampaging type. Pierre, the bullied paranoid jerk who treats all the staff below him like crap, seems much more likely to be a murderous rampaging psychopath to me. But as I said at the beginning of this theory, I think I might have also figured out exactly who Huggy Wuggy and Kissy Missy are as well. And that brings us right back to Elliot Ludwig. Now in chapter 2 we got a little bit more information about Elliot Ludwig. We got a little bit of a backstory about him and his family, including a family member who died. Now myself and many other people have theorized that the family member that died was his daughter, and his daughter would later become Poppy. Now again, we don't really have any concrete evidence for this, but it's a very interesting idea. The idea that Elliot wanted to preserve the life of the family member that he lost, and this was what kicked off this entire scientific program, the one that eventually led to the downfall of this factory. So if we assume that Poppy is Elliot's daughter, and Elliot did this to preserve her life, there is absolutely nothing to say that he wouldn't do the same thing to himself. So who could Elliot be? I actually think there's one candidate that makes so much sense, and that's Huggy Wuggy. Think about it this way. Elliot Ludwig was the face of Playtime Co. He was the founder, and at the beginning he was almost like a celebrity. People knew who he was. He was the face of the company. Well, who is the face of the company now? Huggy Wuggy. There's also a very loose connection in Huggy Wuggy's name. Huggy Wuggy, Elliot Ludwig. Now I agree this is a very loose connection, but we might have actually had a hint in chapter 2 that this is the case. Adding Y to the end of people's names is how they often came up with the names for the characters. Huggy Wuggy. Well, if you take the Y off, you have Wug, and yes, you can absolutely make Wug out of Ludwig. It's even possible that Wug or Wuggy was a nickname of Elliot Ludwig. Again, it's very loose, but look at Ludwig and Wuggy. There is definitely a similarity in there. But this actually makes so much sense if this is true. We've talked before about Huggy Wuggy having almost two different personalities. At the beginning of chapter 1, he's very helpful, he gives you the key, and he seems to be playing with you, but by the end of chapter 2, he's very aggressive and tries to kill you. So what could explain this change in temperament? Well, it's entirely possible that Huggy was just very, very hungry, and he sensed that you were carrying the cat bee, and it was actually the cat bee that he was trying to get to, not you. But it's equally as possible that Huggy Wuggy got very aggressive because you got just a little bit too close to Poppy. Again, the idea that Poppy could be Elliot Ludwig's daughter in a mortal doll form, Huggy Wuggy still has that instinct to protect her. He saw that you were going into the vents knowing full well that those vents led to Poppy, and as the father of Poppy, Huggy Wuggy didn't want you going anywhere near her. It's entirely possible that this aggression was more of a defensive instinct. This would also make chapter 2 even more poignant. The idea that Huggy was dragging himself out of this pit due to sheer will, the will of protecting his daughter. He will do absolutely anything to protect his daughter because he's already lost her once and he doesn't want to lose her again. So I think this makes a lot of sense. Elliot Ludwig trying to preserve his family. And this could also explain exactly who Kissy Missy is. After all, we only know of one couple in the entire game, and that is Elliot Ludwig and his ex-wife Molly. Now yes, Molly divorced Elliot in the same year that he founded Playtime Co. And we can even see this picture, although it's only the top of their heads, you can see Elliot and Molly seemingly hugging in this photo. Again, this makes so much sense to me. Elliot wanted to preserve his daughter, who he lost due to a tragic accident. And he also wants to preserve his wife, who he lost in a divorce. He's bringing back his family together. He's trying to fix the mistakes that he made in 1930. Those mistakes being putting too much of his time and energy into his work. His work that again was started to bring joy to children. He had a very honorable notion, but it cost him everything. And towards the end of his life, he realized that he could get those things he lost back. This could also explain why Kissy Missy helps us. If Kissy is his ex-wife Molly, that would mean that she wasn't involved in this factory. In fact, she left Elliot Ludwig as he created Playtime Co. So she wasn't an ex-employee, she was maybe brought here against her will. Or maybe she was brought here on her deathbed as an example. Elliot giving her the promise of immortal life. Maybe this is why Kissy Missy helps us. She wants this factory to fall. She knows how evil it was because she was never a part of it. Brought here against her will, she sees it for what it is. And by helping the protagonist, she does two things. First of all, she helps us progress through this factory, which could lead to its downfall. But secondly, if, as I've said earlier, Poppy is Elliot's daughter, that could also mean that Poppy is Kissy Missy's daughter as well. After all, we're only assuming that Elliot lost a daughter, but if he did lose a daughter and that daughter is Poppy, who did he have that daughter with? It doesn't seem like he would have had much time for a relationship after starting Playtime Co. After all, we know that his devotion to his work was what caused his wife to leave, so it's entirely possible that when his wife left, she already had a daughter, or she was pregnant with his daughter. Now remember, Kissy Missy and Huggy Wuggy in the story are a couple, and it's entirely possible that this entire dynamic was based on Elliot and Molly's real life, or more likely, the way Elliot wanted his life to be. I think this explanation really does fit well with the lore of Playtime Co. Elliot Ludwig being a very good man, but also being incredibly flawed. His flaw being his desperation to get his family back, the family that he destroyed by his work ethic. 1006 being bitter and resentful at the way he was treated throughout his time at Playtime Co. That resentment eventually leading to him becoming the villain. Kissy Missy being the one that never wanted to be here in the first place, and is now helping the protagonist to try and fix everything. And Poppy being the innocent one, the child who was lost, who has had to come to terms with the fact that she died at a young age and now has to live forever as an immortal doll. So there we go, I hope you did enjoy this video. As always, if you did, don't forget to give it a like, let me know down in the comments below what you think about this theory, and if you want to, consider subscribing as I make lots more videos like this one and more horror gaming content too. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.